Naomi, and good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. New poll results, nutrition programs are helping during COVID-19, but could reach many more people. As Naomi said, my name is Kelsey Boone and I am a child nutrition policy analyst at FRAC. And I am going to be the host of this webinar along with my co-host Ellen Vollinger, the legal director for FRAC and head of our advocacy on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Today we are going to be joined by Vicky Negus from the Massachusetts Law Reform Institute, Sarah McKitterick of the Shah Family Foundation, and Steve Koczela of MassINC Polling Group. And they will be discussing their new poll results surrounding SNAP and pandemic EBT during COVID-19. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah.
Thanks, Kelsey. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah McKitterick. I am a project manager at the Shah Family Foundation. Just some quick background on us and the root of this poll. So the Shah Family Foundation believes that everyone should be empowered to access the fundamentals of well-being and reach their full potential. And we work with government and nonprofit partners to build innovative, sustainable models. So when we heard about P-EBT, we wanted to get involved because we knew how essential it was, as many of you do, for families during this time, and also recognized how important it is to our economy in Massachusetts. So we've been partnering with the Department of Transitional Assistance and others to develop a statewide outreach and communication strategy. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of P-EBT and Mass. Over 700,000 students got P-EBT, and of that, 365,000 of those got P-EBT on P-EBT cards. So those are students not on SNAP. 87% of those P-EBT cards have been activated, and we are now working on a project to increase the number of students who are getting P-EBT and SNAP over the summer. In Mass, we believe that many students who got P-EBT cards could be eligible for SNAP and they're just not getting it. And we also know that now is the time to address the misconceptions. We have a captive audience and we have their contact information. SNAP benefits are at an all-time high, and of course, the need is significant. So to really target this work and this communications and understand the barriers for this group, we wanted to get quantitative data, and so we sponsored this survey led by MassINC Polling Group in Mass. And so I'm going to turn it over to Steve Koczela, who will get more into the data.
Thank you very much, Sarah. My name, for everybody on the call that I haven't met, it's good to see so many familiar names, but for those who I haven't met, my name is Steve Koczela. I'm the president of the MassINC Polling Group. We're a polling firm here in Boston that works a lot on policy polling. We can go ahead and move on to the next slide. We conducted this survey, which was one of the largest survey. It was the largest survey that we've ever conducted. So there is tons more information than what we're going to be able to get to today. I bring that up because all of the data is posted at our website, massincpolling.com. My colleague, Rich Parr, who's also will post the link to that in the chat so that if you're interested in any of the many other questions we asked or the many other ways that this data can be broken down, all that information is available over at our website. And he's also going to be available to answer any questions that you might have in the chat as we walk through the results. So go ahead and next slide. So what is the survey? We contacted over 10,000 households, or we interviewed over 10,000 households and selected school districts across Massachusetts. This was the largest survey that we at the MassINC Polling Group have ever conducted. And it was made that way because it was distributed by the school districts. And we got very good responses as a result of that distribution. The survey was also offered in 8 languages, which certainly made it accessible to pretty much almost any parent who wanted to take it, and it was sponsored by the Shah Family Foundation. So what we're going to do is we're going to touch on some of the highlights, but again, I would just say that if you are looking for more detail, hop on over to our website at massincpolling.com and you'll find all of that there. So next slide, please. We're actually not going to go through the key findings. I did leave them in here because you'll find them if you go to our website. But because of limitations on time, I just want to skip the key findings for now. But if you're interested in kind of how we summarize this in our own heads and what things jumped out at us, check this out on our website. But if you could go past this and the next slide, please. to respondent demographics. So who responded to the survey? This was a survey that was done in a number of different school districts. And as a result, we got a very diverse set of respondents, and a lot of respondents that fit into who you would think of for K-12 parents. So certainly compared to a general population survey, you see many more in kind of the 35 to 44 category than you might otherwise. We also, because of the specific school districts that we surveyed, we got many more parents in households with incomes under 50,000 than we would get if this were just general population. So 40% had high school education or less, and another 30% have less than a college degree. So certainly a lot of people that took the survey would qualify for SNAP, and we'll kind of see how that plays out as we walk through the rest of the presentation. So what is the size and the shape of the problem? That's what the next slide shows. And what this one is the percent who fall into basically a level of food insecurity. So we used a set of questions from the USDA to identify people who would count as being food insecure under a pretty common definition. And there's some things that stick out about this slide. First of all, it just shows how different the levels of food insecurity were during the pandemic between people in different demographic groups. So young people particularly, you see, for instance, people under 29, people under 34, kind of decreases as the parent respondents get older. Black and Latino respondents particularly were much more likely to be food insecure than were white respondents. Asian respondents somewhere in the middle. And not surprisingly, income is a huge divide there. And we'll see that come back and kind of what the reasons were for that as we go through, in terms of what the reasons were that some of the people in those income categories were not reached by some of the benefits that would potentially have been available to them. So on the next slide, we have data on what people knew, basically how familiar they say they were with P-EBT and SNAP. So the familiarity with SNAP is your set of dark red bars there. Familiarity with P-EBT is the blue bars. And you can see that there's pretty broad familiarity with both, but certainly more familiarity with P-EBT. And only about half in either case say they're very familiar with them. You'll see what that means as we go through. There are some specific areas where people are not familiar with the details of SNAP that would potentially have meant that they were eligible. We'll see concerns about immigration, for instance. We'll see misunderstandings about what eligibility thresholds were and that sort of thing that did potentially act as barriers for some people who might otherwise have been able to qualify for some of these benefits. So the next slide shows that those who did, particularly focusing for a minute just on P-EBT, those who did report receiving it, nearly everybody used it, and nearly everybody who knew that they received it used it, and almost everybody said that it was very helpful. So the bottom number, the very helpful, there are actually 4 choices: very, somewhat, not to, and not at all. And almost everybody who said that they used it rated it as highly as they possibly could, which is very unusual in any survey that we do about any government benefit. So I think that the takeaway from this is just that P-EBT was extremely helpful among those who received it and those who used it. So we're going to skip the next slide, which is just a word cloud on how people describe SNAP. That's on our website. But then the next one shows, okay, well, how many accessed SNAP? How many people in different demographic categories and different situations said that they accessed SNAP during the pandemic or received SNAP benefits? Overall, the number in these specific school districts was about 1 in 3, so 32%. But the numbers to focus on in this slide are the numbers in the under 15,000 in income category. Actually, all 3 of these income categories. You can see that it didn't even reach half in any of these categories. Under 15,000 households, 43% of them said that they received SNAP benefits, then 44%, 39%. So it didn't really, didn't reach half in any of those 3 categories. And then the bottom set of boxes there are people who are in different categories of food security or food insecurity. And you can see that even the people in the very lowest category of food security, only 40% in that group said that they accessed SNAP benefits. The same number in the low food security category. So there were people for sure who SNAP would have benefited who did not access SNAP benefits during the pandemic. So the next slide shows a little bit about why that is. What were the limitations that kept people back? And what we're going to look at initially here is just everybody who responded to the survey. And then we're going to get a little bit into specific income categories as to why people did not apply. The number one reasons overall were the perception that I make too much money to get SNAP, my family doesn't need it, and then not knowing how to apply. Those were the top three. But then when you kind of hold this kind of concept in your head, whether something, the question was basically how much does each one apply to you? So keep that idea in mind as we go to the next slide, because what the next one shows is the same thing broken down by income, whether each of these reasons applies to you strongly or somewhat. And what you see is that the reasons when you're looking at people in households under 15,000, 15 to 25, or 25 to 50 are very different and very specific compared to the ones on the previous slide. So the number one reason is I didn't know how to apply. So complexity is something that we saw come up over and over again throughout the survey results, throughout this effort. Just the questions about how to apply, and then the perception that applying was too complicated. You see that as the number three reason there. And another thing that we saw come up, particularly in specific groups, was concerns about immigration. I was afraid SNAP would impact my immigration status. 38% of people making under 15,000 said that concern applied to them, and 32% in the next category. So that was another one that was very common. And then one other that I just wanted to point out that's actually at the bottom of this table, or second from the bottom, is the perception that I think I make too much money to get SNAP. The reason that this one's interesting is because you can see that even in the 25 to 50,000 income bracket, where most or all of the people would still be eligible, this was a very common belief that they think that they made too much money to get SNAP. So a specific set of things in lower income households, and very different than what we saw overall. The next slide then zeroes in on one of the specific items, and it's the specific item about immigration. So this is the same numbers we were just looking at, just pulling out the one that said that they were concerned that SNAP would impact their immigration status, that one applied to them. And you can see that particularly among lower income Latino respondents and lower income Asian respondents, this was a very significant concern. So this one also showed up in some of the other questions that we did in the survey that aren't shown here in this presentation. One was that concerns or that people didn't know, for instance, that the Department of Transitional Assistance does not share immigration status if a family applies for SNAP. They didn't know, just under half didn't know that applying for SNAP for eligible children wouldn't affect their or their children's immigration status. There were kind of some specific things that people didn't know, and then just a general concern that immigration status really was could potentially be impacted if you were to try to access SNAP benefits. So there were some other things too that people were not aware of, and the next slide gets into that a little bit. So in Massachusetts specifically, some things changed about SNAP during the pandemic, and they're outlined at the bottom of the slide if you want to go back and read this at your leisure later on. But the thing that was very clear from this is that people didn't know that those changes had occurred. So 59% said that they were not aware of the changes that were listed here. Only 27% said that they were aware that these changes had actually occurred. And that had an impact. When we then asked people a follow-up question, which is what's shown on the next slide, 34% overall of the people who said they didn't know that those changes had happened. So about a third of those people said, I would have applied had I known that, had I known that all of those things had changed. That's how the previous slide and this one fit together. And those numbers are even higher when you look at people who really needed it, people in the low and very low food security category, which is what you see in that middle set of bars. About half or just over half in those groups said that they would have applied if they'd known that those changes had occurred. You also see more Latino and more Black parents saying that they would have applied also if they had known that those changes had occurred. So this is another area where just information about, who's eligible for SNAP, how it works, what the impacts are of applying for it, and so forth could potentially have changed behavior throughout the pandemic. The next slide shows another thing that people were not necessarily aware of. This is P-EBT recipients who did not apply for SNAP. A specific thing that they didn't know was that they could get both SNAP and P-EBT at the same time. That's one where 48%, where you see the 48% number on the far left of the chart. There were some others, again, I didn't know how to apply for SNAP and so forth, that should be familiar by now, but the specific one that this question really brought out was that people didn't necessarily know that both benefits could have been available to them. The next slide shows that shows people's perceptions of eligibility cutoffs and also benefit amounts. And basically we showed people what each one was. It just showed them kind of what the actual information was. And a lot of people said that both the benefit amount and the income level were higher than they thought they would be. And a lot of people were also just unsure as to what those numbers actually would be. So this is another one where there's an opportunity to kind of educate people and potentially bring more people in who would be eligible for benefits if they kind of knew that the benefits were targeted at them and people in their situation. And then the final one was just one more kind of detail question, basically how you can apply for SNAP. And this is one where we saw basically very few who knew kind of all the different ways that you could potentially apply, and particularly among lower income households, the lowest income households, we saw that this was even more prevalent. So this is another thing where people didn't necessarily know what would be involved in getting themselves the benefits that they could potentially be eligible for. So kind of to summarize it all, there were a number of different information gaps that people expressed. They particularly had to do with complexity. They had to do with the details, very pertinent details of the program, and immigration status was another thing which just was very specifically a concern for a lot of parents. So that is a very, very quick run through of some of the highlights. I'd again encourage you to check it out on our website, and do email us. Our contact information is at the end of this presentation, or call us if there's anything else you'd like to explore about this survey. But with that, I'm going to hand it back to Sarah.
Thanks, Steve. That was great. I think there's many things that we can do with this data, and Vicky's going to talk about a few advocacy angles in a moment. But just to touch on how we're further communicating this out with students receiving P-EBT. So right now, Massachusetts is in its phase of summer P-EBT, which is great, but we want to kind of use the momentum over the summer, especially as P-EBT is likely ending, to say, hey, if you got P-EBT, you can now get SNAP. So we have been working on communications to integrate SNAP into all of the P-EBT work that we do, and then we're going to make a really strong push in August and September as students go back to school to hopefully encourage families to get on SNAP. And we'll use all of the data points that we uncovered to do so, and really want to highlight the things like in regards to the amount of money that you can make, the changes during COVID, the fact that you can get P-EBT and SNAP at the same time, immigration, and really kind of highlighting how folks can apply. So just to quickly highlight some of the things that we have done on our website, which I'll put on the chat in our P-EBT website, we actually created an entire page just devoted to SNAP and linked to it throughout the site. We also made Got P-EBT, Get SNAP, highlighting different aspects of kind of what we just spoke to in our outreach materials. So we have social posts, flyers, texts, and robocalls that schools and partners can push out, and we have those in 11 languages, and we're actually reissuing those next month to more closely align with this data. We also, or actually I should say the Department of Transitional Assistance texted about 32,000 clients who received P-EBT. They got those phone numbers because people called and agreed to provide their phone number to get a replacement P-EBT card. So we sent a text out about SNAP to 32,000 folks, and 9,000 of them clicked through to the webpage that you see here, which was a really good return. And then a large percentage of those actually clicked through to apply. So that's something that we've been testing and we're going to relaunch in August. We are also working to get the word out in multiple languages across the state. And one other thing that the Department of Transitional Assistance is doing is all students in the mail that are getting summer P-EBT will be getting a notice about summer P-EBT, and we put a SNAP flyer in there as well. So hopefully those are coming out in the next couple of weeks. So we expect to see a large increase in traffic from that. So we'll be launching additional materials. Like I said, we'll be launching videos in the next month and doing another text too, all in line with this data. And just wanted to note that we are happy to share any of these things. In addition to the data, we also can share raw files or any files that you need if you want to replicate some of this work in the work that you're currently doing. We're happy to share. My contact info is at the end. So now I'm going to turn it over to Vicky Negus, who will talk about advocacy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you to FRAC for hosting this webinar, and to the Shah Family Foundation and to MassINC for doing the survey. I think it was a really timely and critical look at what's happening here. And I think there were a lot of pieces of this that are relevant for folks in other states as well. So I just wanted to quickly mention those couple of areas. So the kind of three core spaces that we felt the survey results were really relevant in a national way and in other states was that the data really underscored to us the need that all of us are already aware of, but it really underscored the need to decrease the fear and chill effect on immigrant communities, and the role of federal and state governments and for advocates and community partners to be really intentional about engaging and trying to decrease that fear in communities. We also really saw the need to implement kind of ongoing and positive policies to increase access to SNAP and ensure a greater percent of households who are eligible can successfully get and keep the benefits they're eligible for. And kind of our third core takeaway was just the pure need to boost SNAP benefits beyond the current temporary boost that's in place, and the need for Congress and for USDA to really reevaluate the monthly benefit amount for families so that more families can face a reduction in food insecurity through programs like SNAP. So those are the areas that those were our big takeaways. And with that, I want to turn things over to Kelsey for an announcement from FRAC.
Thanks, Vicky. So really quickly, I just want to highlight that FRAC released a new guide on SNAP outreach in schools. And this guide includes information on implementation of outreach strategies, as well as examples of SNAP outreach toolkits from other states. So feel free to check that out. The link is in the slide deck, which will go out later with the recording. Next slide. So we have about 5 minutes left for questions, and I will be looking through the Q&A box. So if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A box. And this is the contact information for me and my co-host. Again, Alan Vollinger, and my name is Kelsey Boone. So there is a question currently that is, what is the SNAP participation rate of those eligible in Massachusetts? So I'll open this up for panelists.
Yeah, I can take that one. So I would say our SNAP participation, we have Massachusetts has had a 26% increase in our SNAP caseload since the start of the pandemic, largely due to outreach and work like what Sarah mentioned in terms of affirmatively reaching out to groups of folks who are likely eligible for but not receiving the benefit. But just like many other states, we know that we have many households who are eligible and are not receiving SNAP. So for example, we have about 700,000 people who are receiving Medicaid, who aren't receiving SNAP, but who are likely income eligible for the program. So while we really think Massachusetts has done a great job in terms of increasing access to this critical program, just like many other states, we have a long way to go.
Thanks, Vicky. So the next question is about current advocacy efforts. So there is a social services advisory board that is trying to make the SNAP interview waiver permanent. And they're wondering if there are any other efforts that could complement or dovetail with that. I don't know if anyone on the panel knows of anything, or Evie, if you know anything.
Yeah, I don't know, Ellen, if you're there and want to chime in, but I think the comment underscores a concern that we have in Massachusetts is around how do we take some of the really critical lessons around accessing SNAP during the pandemic and turn those into permanent improvements to the program. So I definitely agree that that's a space that we are interested in and have concerns about moving forward. But Ellen, I think you probably have potentially more thoughts than me in that front.
Yeah, no, I think we would really encourage all of the people who are on the call and others to let us know, and let, more importantly, policymakers and USDA know, what are the things that have been working? What are the features and flexibilities that have been working? Because we've heard Secretary Vilsack from USDA say very publicly that they're interested in learning what worked well and what could be continued when we get to the other side of this. And so all of us are looking to get to the other side of COVID-19, but your feedback, I think, would help inform what the program looks like going forward.
All right, I was just checking the Q&A to see if there are any other outstanding questions, and I do not see any, but we do have one more minute just in case anybody has a last minute question. Otherwise, you can reach out to myself or Ellen or any of the panelists, and like I said, there will be an email going out with the recording and the slide deck later. There was a question on the MOU or data agreement that you had to complete to get the non-SNAP P-EBT participant list for outreach. That was answered in the chat, but if someone would like to reiterate, that'd be good.
I can speak to that. So the survey was actually sent out through the school, so there was no MOU needed because as trusted sources, they sent that out on MassINC's behalf.
All right, awesome. Thank you to all of our panelists. We're actually going to wrap up because that is the end of our time. Like I said, I would like to thank all of our panelists, and I'd like to thank all of these people that have attended, and the email will be going out shortly. So I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we will see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.